Welcome back. We're doing the Trailer Park Boys again. We're coming to the end of the series as it currently stands now, and I thought it would be good to kind of talk again about why we're here. I started out this series because I, as a newer fan of the Trailer Park Boys, noticed that a lot of the older fans have a lot of vitriol, a lot of malice, okay, for the later seasons of the show, the Swernet / Netflix seasons, if you will. Being a newer fan, I don't have the nostalgia element in play. Since when I came into the series, it was all kind of just there as one thing that I could view back to back. So I thought that I could go into it with a kind of unbiased perspective and kind of see if maybe there was a decline in quality and what could maybe have contributed to that, as somebody who's just really enthusiastic about the show as a whole. I think I came to the conclusion last time that I do prefer the earlier seasons of the show that we have already discussed. But spoiler alert, I really enjoyed season 11 and I really think the show's making a comeback, guys. I really think they can still do it. So in season 9, what would happen if Jim was in charge of Sunnyvale and the park was completely dry and the boys were ousted, and that didn't fucking work and nobody enjoyed that fucking season. Then in season 10, we saw Julian take charge and we saw that his way didn't really work either, and he paid a hefty price for that. He actually left the park without saying goodbye, which I will probably bring up multiple times throughout this video because I'm salty about it, bro. Now in season 11, somewhat surprisingly in my opinion, we're getting the park with Bubbles in charge. I'm fully here for it. This is not a slight on Bubbles whatsoever, and I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the part with Bubbles in charge kind of fucking works. So because we start off this season without Julian, he's not getting a little talk about section at the beginning of this video because I'm just mean like that, okay? We're gonna start with Big Man Bubbles. He's gonna come first for the first time in the series history, okay? So Bubbles has got his little pizza sauce business going, okay, and he's got a cute little cart that he drives his little sauce bottles around in. The people in the park help him to grow vegetables to make the sauce, and as a result, they are all making enough money to pay their lot fees. So Bubbles is not only doing something that gives back and benefits the community, but doing something that benefits the outside world also. Okay, he's given the park a good reputation out there after all the shit that the other guys have got him in. When Julian does eventually come back, because you know that my boy is always going to come back, okay? He's like Willie Afton, he just cannot rest without fucking everybody else's shit up. It doesn't knock Bubbles' confidence whatsoever. I really feel like Bubbles has grown the most out of the 3 main boys throughout the entire series, okay? And I really respect the growth that he has made. He is not afraid to speak up to Julian in a way that I really think he wouldn't in previous seasons. Like, it's not even in a, oh, I don't know about this, Julian, type of fucking Morty kind of way. He full on just is really sassy with Julian and is like, fuck you, I'm not letting you get away with this. I think it's safe to say that Julian is officially off the pedestal. I think that Bubbles also is still really salty about Julian leaving them behind last season. Despite all of that though, Bubbles still loves Julian, and it's this love, okay? It's Bubbles' big heart that gets in the way this season. He still wants Julian around, bro, and he knows that letting Julian get away with his little manipulations that are very obvious to Bubbles at this point, because Bubbles has seen Julian as a truly selfish person that he is at this point. He knows that letting Julian get away with manipulating him and letting him get what he wants is a way to keep him around and keep the boys together, and that's all that Bubbles really wants, deep in his heart, okay? So even though he's wise to the way that Julian is now, and a lot of the time he clocks on to what Julian is trying to do in his little snide, manipulative ways, Julian still does it because Bubbles lets him. Bubbles has also got this cute little side narrative with the dog. Cool now, they rescue him from a hot car in the first episode. And even though Bubbles insists he doesn't like dogs, he gets this cute little bond with this dog, okay? It's a very sweet thing to witness. I really feel like it might be Ricky who's the side character out of the boys in this season. One of them always kind of has to be pushed back to let the other two have a more prominent storyline. But I feel like a lot of the time in the past that has been Bubbles' role. Lucy's gone. We don't really get much explanation of that other than Ricky had a bedroom air fryer, I think it was, or a deep fryer, which would be even fucking worse. And he also has an ongoing war with the squirrels, which I can imagine is, you know, kind of fucking annoying. His next girlfriend, Susan, right? I'm right? Am I right? His next girlfriend does make an appearance this season, but they only interact once and she is not yet named. Ricky is going to open a kids' hockey camp this season because, as we learned in the early seasons, Ricky's calling is just working with children, all right? He's just good at that. And kids are also good for manual illegal like labor, which is not something that we as an audience should learn from the series, but it's something that Ricky has definitely learned from the series. I really enjoy the fact that he's doing the hockey camp this season, as you can probably tell. I always liked it when Ricky would be involved with like Trinity's friends and stuff when they were younger, and his whole thing with Leahy's daughter was cute. I think that Ricky is essentially like a really like a good dad and father figure in a lot of ways. He's just really responsible. Seeing him interact with kids is wholesome, but it also holds a lot of opportunity for comedy. Iconic moments from Ricky this season are that he apparently always carries a Slim Jim on him, which as far as I can tell is like a crowbar for jimmying open car doors. Ricky is also smart at maths when he is calculating weed and the time it will take to grow weed and how much weed they will have at the end of the weeding process, or whatever the fuck you call it. So Ricky does girl math, I guess. Leahy last season revealed to us as an audience that he is Ricky's father. Or at least he's under the impression that he is Ricky's real father. He hasn't acted on that yet, nobody knows except us and him, basically. But he is using his role as supervisor to kind of gentle parent Ricky from afar and kind of try to make life easier for him. Leahy is also engaged to Randy. Congratulations, guys. Randy's got his own thing going on this season. Randy is trying to get into the police force. We all know that Randy's thing, his whole character arc, is about getting respect. And since being Trailer Park supervisor didn't earn him the respect in any way whatsoever that he thought it was, I guess this is kind of his last bid for that respect by going that little bit higher and like kind of turning into a little Mr. Leahy by becoming a police officer, because obviously we know that Mr. Leahy is the epitome of manhood in Randy's world. You might think that this is an undoing of Randy's character development in the last few seasons, where he realized that he didn't need a job to have respect for himself, but it doesn't. I'll get into that in a little bit. So he wants to be a cop, and this directly opposes Jim, who wants to keep the peace in the park. We find out early on that Randy is training with Ted, and this just means that Ted is taking advantage of Randy and making him give him sexual favors. I don't know why I'm laughing, because I was actually really upset by this. I was upset for a second there. I was like, the whole joke this season is that Randy isn't even signed up to be on the police force or in the training program, and Ted has just been using him this entire time. I'm gonna fucking blow my lid. But yeah, it doesn't go there. Don't worry. Don't worry, Randy fans. So we are going to slide into episode number 1 for the first of our notable episode. So Bubbles is selling his sauce at the market, and this big shot guy comes over and he's like, I want to buy the recipe. Bubbles is going to accept it, and then Ricky has this like, what would Julian do moment, and it results in Bubbles getting a much better deal of selling the sauce to the guy, like being a supplier. I love the way that these later seasons try to incorporate themes and ideas from the earlier seasons so that the spirit of the show is not lost. And something that I pointed out in an earlier review of the show is that I don't think that Julian could come up with a lot of his ideas if it wasn't for Ricky's creative mind, basically, okay? And once again, even though Julian isn't here, it was Bubbles prompting Ricky to think what Julian would do that made him come up with this idea, right? And it was a really fucking smart idea. So props to my boy. Snaps. We've always got to give Ricky snaps, okay? We quickly find out that Julian has been lying to the boys about being cross-country somewhere, and he's actually quite close by and living in a storage container. It was a dick move to lie anyway when he was so close and the boys could have come and visit him anytime. And I don't at this moment want to speculate on what his reasons were for that. He also lies to them about the fact he's got a job like lobster fishing, because it turns out that he's just going stealing lobsters out of other people's traps. This, I think, is him, I guess, trying to look good in front of the boys and trying to make it look like he's got this good life out here without them, and that like he doesn't need them in that way. Maybe hoping to feel like they kind of need him. He does say to the boys, you're better off without me. And I was like, oh my god, did Julian actually learn something last season? Are we going to see a changed man in Julian? And the boys are trying to like convince him to come back and help them with the pizza sauce business. And he's like, no, you can do it without me. It's chill. And then Snoop Dogg calls and he wants some of this de-energy or de-energizer, or whatever the fuck it's called. I don't know right now, okay? It's like, he wants this stuff, this weed stuff, okay, that Ricky makes. He offers a lot more money than this pizza sauce thing is ever gonna make, okay? And it's this that makes Julian agree to come back to the park. And it's like, at a certain point, anyone would be convinced by a lot of money. You can't really hold that against him. And it is also a central part of his character, so it is selfish as well, and he does immediately start in with the manipulations. Like, he only says that he missed the boys after Snoop Dogg makes this offer and he's trying to convince them to do illegal stuff again when they haven't for so long. It makes you wonder whether he really did miss them or not, considering he was lying about being right nearby and hasn't seen them. It made me remember that Julian has wanted out of the park since season 1. And it's like, I don't know, it's weird. Like, is he a complex character and he kind of loves the boys but thinks he deserves life better than them, and so he feels like he has to separate from them? There's this terrible read of Julian where this whole time he hasn't had any character development whatsoever, and he's still wanted out since season 1, and he still sees himself as better than all these people. And I don't want it to be like that, and I don't think it is. I honestly don't, I really don't. But he's still a selfish dick. Important to note that Bubbles' sauce business was not enough to get Julian back to the park. Not only was it not enough money, but just the fact that he didn't want to help Bubbles to succeed, even though Bubbles really wanted him to and was willing to share his success with Julian. That wasn't enough to get Julian back to the park. So that's going to have an impact on Bubbles. And then immediately when they accept the Snoop Dogg deal, Julian hijacks the sauce business. He's like, we're not doing that anymore. We're taking over the factory or whatever it is, the kitchen, and we're turning it into a weed business. It's very clear from this interaction that Bubbles' sauce business means absolutely nothing to Julian. He doesn't see it as like a worthy endeavor, okay? And I don't know whether it's just at this point that Julian needs the thrill of a little crime for a job to feel worthwhile to him. I don't even know. Like, he just has such a disrespect for anything that requires what he sees as effort. But it would be so much less effort to just keep making the fucking sauce. Julian, bro, sit down, have a minute. This is the inciting incident for a lot of tension that's going to be between Julian and Bubbles for the entire season, because obviously this clear indication that the sauce business is not seen as worthy by Julian is not going to sit right with Bubbles, okay, when it's something that he's been working really hard for all this time. And it is obviously something to really be proud of. I think we can all acknowledge that. Give Bubbles a little snap, okay? There's also tension happening between Leahy and Randy. Obviously, with Randy being in the police force and Jim seeming to be really dismissive of that, we can kind of think that maybe Jim's jealous, or maybe he just doesn't want Randy to turn out like him. They end up having a bit of a conversation about it, and it turns out that Randy isn't trying to join the police force for himself, which is why it doesn't ruin his previous character development, all right? He's trying to do it to make Jim proud of him, because I guess to move to the status of husband, Randy feels like he has to like be more than he was as Jim's partner, right? Which makes sense kind of illogically in a person's brain, especially a person like Randy who is kind of so prideful in that way. So Randy insists that he kind of has to do this, and Jim respects it. So in this episode, Randy starts blackmailing Ted because he's filmed him kind of coercing him into doing these sexual favors, and now he's going to blackmail him into getting him into the police force, even though he's really unfit, and so I guess you can't be a cop if you're really fat or whatever. It really subverted my expectations of what the joke was going to be this season, and it means that Randy gets to get one back on Ted for all the things that he has done to him in the past. We love a bit of karma in this series. There's also this really good moment where Ted is making Randy jog by the police cruiser, and Randy just gives up and he blackmails him into taking him to the Burger King drive-thru instead. The blackmailing works, and I think that this goes to Randy's head because this is the first time where he's gotten results so quickly and kind of gotten what he wants out of a situation, like ever, I guess. So then he kind of starts using blackmail to get everything, and he starts threatening his engagement with Jim to get Jim to go along with what he wants to do at the park, which is not good, okay? And we don't respect Randy for that. Episode 3 is the one where Ricky gets shot in the balls. And I think that it's a really, really important one in the canon of the series, okay? And in the development of Bubbles and Julian's relationship. Julian wants to use glue on Ricky's balls. And he wants to take him to Sam to stitch him up instead of to a real hospital. And obviously, it being such an intimate area of Ricky's body that they don't want anything to permanently damage, okay? The other two don't want to do this. And they get all the way to the hospital, and Julian starts using reverse psychology to try and get them to go to Sam's instead. Bubbles knows exactly what Julian is doing, but it works because Julian kind of implies that going into the hospital will end up in them getting Mo, Trinity's son, taken away because he is the one who shot Ricky in the balls in the first place because he got hold of a gun. It's at this point I think that Bubbles really starts to doubt Julian's morals, and there's a lot of other instances throughout the season where Julian has a chance to prove to Bubbles that their relationship and Bubbles himself really matters to Julian, and he fails. So he won't admit that he stole a truck to get Bubbles' truck back out of an impound lot. He gives liquor to some kids to make them go and bottle Jim, which is a great fucking scene. It's really, really funny. But obviously giving alcohol to minors is bad, and then also, you know, telling them to throw bottles at an old man isn't too great either. This all climaxes close to the end of the season with Julian letting the kids from Ricky's hockey camp harvest the weed for the deal with Snoop, and Bubbles takes action at this point and he makes Julian film a confession video where he says the kids were innocent, and also Bubbles was innocent, because Bubbles at this point at the end of the series, having seen all of these instances where Julian has failed him, is willing to be just as selfish as Julian is, because Julian hasn't been willing to put himself on the line for Bubbles so much throughout the series, right? And it all started, the little domino here was him just not appreciating the fact that Bubbles had built himself this small thing in his fucking sauce business, bro. And I found that so sad. It's also in episode 3 that Ricky pulls a gun on Julian, and I understand that it was concerning his balls, but it was also this indication of like Julian being off the pedestal for Rick as well. He really just feels more equal to the other boys this season because they've had life without him, okay? They've come of age. They know they don't need him. They even like take the piss out of him more. Not that they don't have respect for him, but they have a lot less like reverence for him, you know? Jules gets a little bit calmer this episode also because he has to get Sam his nice big truck. There's this scene where Randy comes up to them to try and put his like cop moves on them, and Julian gets rid of him by pulling on his nose. He doesn't like punch him or do any real damage, and it's this silly scene that also reminds you that these people canonically have like grew up together and this is probably was a regular occurrence for them growing up. Also, Randy comes back, I think it might be later on or in the next episode, and he hits Rick in the balls. Even though it wasn't Ricky who pulled Randy's nose, Ricky and Julian count as one entity in people's minds and karmically, so Randy hits Ricky in the balls to get back at Julian, which I think is funny. We see Randy doing some recon in this episode. He has truly begun the metamorphosis into Leahy, which has been that's his whole arc this season, I guess. Episode 4 is the all-important Darth Leahy episode. Randy is gonna use the boys as his smoking gun to get him in with the police. They can't possibly turn him down despite the fact that he's horrifically unfit. If he takes down these guys who the police have been trying to take down for years at this point. Jim, knowing about Randy's little plot and acting in loco parentis to Ricky not yet knowing that Leahy believes that he's his father, he decides to tip Rick off and tell him to get whatever he's doing out of the park before Randy can get the police in there. He does it in a way, though, that still feels respectful to Randy. Like, he just doesn't tell Ricky the whole story, and he doesn't try to stop Randy from doing what he's doing besides like one calm discussion, okay? He says something like, Randy's his own man, like, I can't stop him from pursuing his dream, but he feels this loyalty to Ricky, okay? And so he does what he thinks is best in that situation. The direct result of this is that when the police turn up, there's nothing going on once again. The boys have duped them, and Randy is disgraced. He's never going to make it into the police force, and the metamorphosis into Leahy is complete, okay? I love this, okay, for many, many reasons. I always try and put this philosophical spin on the show, and I always talk about the karma in the show and stuff like that. This is a show about morals and big philosophical questions, okay? This particular episode plays out like a fucking Greek tragedy, okay? It's like Oedipus, bro, when he gets the prophecy that he's gonna shag his mum and kill his dad, and so he moves away so that can never happen, and he kills this king and marries the king's wife, and it turns out that they were his real birth parents because he was adopted, bro. Leahy, in this moment, believes that he is Ricky's father, and he does something that directly results in Randy, the love of his life, losing out on this job, and also, in a kind of more meta sense, he loses out on the boys going away to jail forever, which is something that otherwise, without this new lease on life that he's gotten and this new motivation to actually treat Ricky like a son, it's something that he's always wanted, right? It's something that could have brought the pair of them a lot of happiness, and Jim squanders it in the name of this familial bond. Jim really has found a sense of purpose in Ricky's family, and that continues throughout the episodes where he does think that he is Ricky's dad. Obviously, at a certain point, we're going to find out that Ricky isn't even Jim's son, and this completely shatters the bond between them. And so Jim has kind of squandered Randy's future, and a future that he probably would have been happy in, or that he at least thinks he would have been happy in, for this thing that just didn't exist. And I love that. I think that's ironic as hell, and I love it. Randy never finds out about this, I think, which is probably good. Anyway, it's after this that Randy admits that he wanted Jim to be proud of him rather than wanting this sense of pride within himself, and it's at this point that Jim says, obviously I'm fucking proud of you, you idiots, and their relationship is strengthened and the bond is there forever. And actually, unlike a Greek tragedy, the fact that Randy blew it in the police force doesn't matter because the two of them have each other and that's all they need, okay? But at this point, Jim still does think that he's Ricky's dad, so we still have that whole fallout to deal with at a later date. So I personally think that the Darth Leahy moment is hilarious, with the whole fight with the brooms or whatever it is, and Ricky being on the edge of the deck of the trailer and the way he just stupidly falls off at the end after this big dramatic moment. I personally love it, and I think that the father-son relationship that develops between Leahy and Ricky is actually weirdly sweet and wholesome. I like the way that Jim talks Ricky down from his like temper tantrums, I guess, the way that he has this weird calming force instead of getting frustrated with Ricky, as I feel like a lot of people would. Dads would. And the little golf trip that they take with their matching shirts is also very, very cute and sweet. It's in this episode that Julian takes Bubbles on this boating trip, and he shows him this cape that's up for sale, and he says that the whole reason he wanted to take Snoop's deal in the first place is so he could buy it, and the three of them could all go and live there with their families and whatever, and be out of the park. This is never brought up again in this season, and I'm unsure whether Jules just said it to butter Bubbles up, or whether this is true facts. So I need to give you some context I haven't mentioned before we get into episode 10, the finale, and that is that obviously we find out that neither Ray nor Jim are Ricky's dad, so that's a question that's left up in the air. But obviously this shatters this sense of purpose that Jim has once again found outside of himself instead of finding it inside of himself like we all know he needs to, okay? And the sense of purpose was in Ricky's family, and now that he's found out he's not Ricky's dad, there's now all this anguish between them, and that's completely fucked. So he loses that sense of purpose and once again turns to the liquor, and he and Randy get absolutely trashed and start trying to fuck up everybody's life. So in the finale, Jim and Randy kidnap Bubbles, and they take him on a boat and they tie him up, and they're going to throw him overboard if Julian and Ricky don't hand over the cash from the Snoop deal that they have successfully done, by the way. Julian and Bubbles have been at odds all season, and I think that even though obviously the scene is injected with the usual amount of humour and the stakes don't feel very high because of the show that we're on, in any other show this would be like a huge dramatic moment in their friendship, okay? And I feel like the little bones of it are there. I feel the intensity of the situation right now, okay? Because with the way that Bubbles has been questioning Julian's morals throughout the season, there's probably a big part of him at this point that doesn't think Julian will hand over this big amount of cash for Bubbles' life, okay? And that's so dramatic. I think it's funny how the show does have these moments that would feel massive in any other show, and they just treat it like it's nothing. They treat it with a lot of humour and not a lot of groundedness, and I appreciate that because it does add to the hilarity. But when you take a step back, you're like, Jesus, this is a little bit fucked, actually. So everybody gets arrested, including George for being a bad police chief. So that's karma for him for the entire series, and especially for this season where he's used his new position as police chief to take the absolute piss out of everyone and just be corrupt as hell. Ted gets out of it by basically doing sexual favors for another cop, which is personal karma for him, not just for being a dick throughout the series, but for all the times that he's basically sexually assaulted Randy at this point and exploited him in that way. Jim ends up in jail. There's no happy ending for him this time. He's actually turned into a full-on liquor disciple by the end of this and lost his fucking mind. So we'll see where that goes, I guess. There's also sworn vengeance on Julian, which is, you know, part of the course, but it feels a little bit more serious this time, guys. I don't know. So I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply about Bubbles and Julian's relationship this season, because I really feel like that is the central focus point, and I really enjoyed it, dude. I love their friendship. Bubbles' way of running the park worked. Okay, and Julian came and fucked it all up. This is uncontested. Nobody can argue with me about that. They didn't even get the money at the end of it, so it wasn't even worth it. At the end of the season, Bubbles gets his sauce business back, and he doesn't get in trouble. He doesn't go to jail. I love the fucking show, Karma, and I love it especially because Julian also doesn't go to jail, and you would think I would be unhappy about this. Okay, but we all know that jail doesn't do shit for Julian. This man is not going to reform. He's a recidivist, okay? A recidivist. The real punishment for Julian was losing the money, and nothing is going to hurt him more than that, and having another plan having failed. So he didn't need to go to jail, and I appreciate that the show understands that. And now he has to work for Bub's pizza sauce business like he didn't want to do, and he's back at the park like he hasn't wanted since season 1. So fuck you, Julian. I just really love Julian so much. I just fucking love this show. I just like to get involved. I feel like I see a lot of discourse about how Julian is more of a dick this season among the fandom, and for me, I just don't see it. Everybody knows at this point, if you've seen literally any of my other reviews, Julian has always been a dick. I think Julian has always been a dick. That is a central part of his character. He's selfish, he's money hungry, he'll do anything to get by, and most of the time he will put himself before everybody else and fuck them. So people kind of haven't seen it that way, because I feel like people are, you know, like, it's like I said before, people aren't looking too deeply into this little comedy show, okay? And so a lot of people are probably like willing to go along with the way that the people in the show see Julian as this hero. It's at this point that the show has taken it in a direction where it's willing to acknowledge that Julian is not that guy. And at this point, he's willing to do things not only to characters that we like, but that are in opposition to him, like Jim, but to characters that we love and that are his friends, like Bubbles. And he's always done bad things to Ricky and Bubbles, but it's always been in this like deceptive way that he's been getting away with for so long. And now that it's in everybody's face, I feel like they don't like it, and they feel like Julian has changed somehow. And I suppose he has changed because he's more honest about it, but I personally like the honesty. I almost like Julian more as a person, for him just being out and out about the fact that he just wants to get his bag and he doesn't care. I also need Julian to be like this for the show to work, because otherwise it'd just be a nice little show about a nice little wholesome trailer park. I love Bubbles and Julian's friendship. I love the way that Bubbles teases Julian, and I love that he seems to be like the only person who can really crack Julian's demeanor and make him smile in those moments. They have a really unique relationship, even within the trio of Ricky, Bubbles, and Julian. And I just think it's really special, and I really like it. Some notes for the season: Jacob's an alien. He's got a weird unidentified element in his blood. I don't know if this ever comes up again, so I just thought I'd mention it. There is no J-Rock this season, which, I understand that's going to lose points with a lot of people. But I still really enjoyed this season, I don't know. One of the things that Jim says when he is under the influence is he's talking about the liquor force guiding the way. And with that and the Darth Leahy stuff, I'm just like, which writer was rewatching Star Wars while he was writing the script? I need to know. Personal question. My favourite episode is episode 9. The boys think they have killed Jim and Randy in a trailer that got like launched into the water. Jim and Randy are just pissed as fuck and going on classic liquor escapades dressed as cops. And they steal a cop car. And it just feels like an escalation of things we saw in earlier seasons, which feels appropriate for the bigger way that the show presents now. Randy finally hears the liquor speaking to him in this season. So I think in that moment is when the transformation into Leahy is truly complete. But Randy does seem to recover at the end of the season, so good for him. Jim nearly fucking shoots himself in this episode, which is another one of those moments where it'd be like really dramatic in any other show, but in this one, Randy's just like, you put the gun down, bitch. I love that Randy is the one to talk Jim down again. Right after he nearly shoots himself, they were gonna arrest the boys and stuff, and then Ted comes over, an actual cop, and everybody from the park comes together to lie to Ted because fuck the cops, am I right? In conclusion, I think this is a really good fucking season, dude. I just really enjoyed the exploration of Bubbles and Julian's friendship. I like the fact that the dynamics have shifted, but not in a way that anything has really been changed. It's just a new avenue that the show can explore, so it doesn't get run into the ground, bro. But it keeps the spirit of the show. There's a lot of callbacks to earlier seasons, like the stuff with dressing up as the cops, Ricky having a hockey camp and being involved with the kids again. And apart from anything else, this is the season that has truly returned the status quo to the park, because we had the whole season with Dancer, and then we had the whole season where Julian was in charge, and then Julian just fucking left. At the end of last season, everything was fucked. Like, it used to be this formula where they came out of jail at the beginning of the season and you knew they were going to end up back there at the end. And sometimes they'd subvert it a little bit, but it always came back to that by the end of the next season, right? We've had a few seasons now where everything has felt out of whack and fucked up. And finally, at the end of this season, all three boys are back at the park. And Jim and Randy are going to be back there eventually. Like, they're in jail or whatever. But I feel like I just really enjoyed this one. It was just good, wasn't it? It was just a good one. If you disagree with me, I would like to know why. But I just really liked it. I thought it was good. I feel like it felt like a classic season, but with this overture of like more produceness, more money. It's bigger, it's longer, it's uncut. Okay, all right, I'm gonna go, but I do hope anybody that is watching this has enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.